Good afternoon. We are doing it live right here. Mottek on Money, live on the air in the 4 o'clock hour, doing more at 4 for you here on 790 KBC. Streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and your on-demand Mottek on Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Tech stocks getting the week off to a record start on Wall Street with the NASDAQ propelling to an all-time high. We see this after a record-shattering week on Wall Street, which propelled the Dow to above 40,000 for the very first time. That's how it ended the week on Friday. Today, the Dow actually retreated after ending last week above the 40K milestone. The Dow went down 197 points today to end at 39,807. The S&P 500 finished out up 5 points at 5308, and the NASDAQ went up 109 points to settle at 16,795, scoring its ninth record high close of the year as tech stocks rallied. As we've noted here, stocks seem to like bad news on the economy lately, as investors have cheered signs of a cooling economy as evidence supporting the case for the Fed pulling back on interest rates for easier monetary policy from the Federal Reserve. It was a nervous start to the new week, and the energy markets. Oil futures did pop initially, but then gave up early gains as traders weighed the potential risk to global crude oil supplies following the death of Iran's president in a helicopter crash over the weekend. Also concerns about the health of Saudi Arabia's king, and also impacting the energy markets. Mohammed Mokber, the Iranian first vice president, has been named the country's interim president following the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash. Mokber has a strong connection with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the office of the supreme leader in Iran has been sanctioned by both the European Union and the United States in the past due to violations of human rights. We did see the price of oil ultimately end a bit lower today, down 26 cents to settle at $79.80 a barrel. And Brent crude in London initially higher, but then closed down 27 cents at $83.71 a barrel. I'll discuss the latest news in the Middle East and the oil markets with prominent oil analyst John Kilduff, and again, Capital and CNBC contributor, who'll be joining us live later this hour. It was a big day in downtown Los Angeles today. The China-California Business Forum was held at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Had the honor of emceeing the morning's event, bringing together local officials, business organizations, and companies of both California and China with the goal of expanding business ties. Addressing the event today, the Chinese Consul General in Los Angeles, Guo Xiaocheng, said China is California's largest trading partner, and California has the largest presence of Chinese-invested companies among all states in the United States. The bilateral economic and trade cooperation has facilitated growth in employment and the economy, benefiting the peoples of both China and the U.S., as was noted this morning. And a series of memorandum of understanding were signed during the event to boost trade cooperation further between China and California, including one between the World Trade Center Los Angeles and Shanghai Foreign Investment Development Board, and another between the San Francisco International Airport and Shanghai Airport Authority. It was noted today that more than half of the containers entering and leaving the Port of Los Angeles, for example, are for trade with China, and 70% of the cargo volume of the Port of Long Beach is China-related. A federal lawsuit has been filed challenging the constitutional limits on telehealth, which prevent California patients from accessing specialty care that local doctors are not able to provide. I'll talk about that later this hour with Caleb Trotter, an attorney at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Among the tech stocks rallying today, well, you guessed it, NVIDIA moving higher. The so-called Magnificent One moving up more than $23 at $947.80. Apple also in on the rally, up $1.17 at $191 and change. Let's pull up some of the other members of the so-called Magnificent Seven, and that would, of course, include Microsoft, which has been on a roll, surprisingly. Microsoft, of course, now a big player in the AI world as well. Microsoft shares up another 5 and change today at $425.34. Google, the parent company Alphabet, of course, also in on the rally today. Let's see if we can bring that one up here. Google shares did end the day higher. Let's see by how much here. Moving up just 86 cents to 176.92. Taking a look at Netflix, which has been in the spotlight lately, moving up nearly $20 today at $640.82. Checking the business of Hollywood today, Paramount Global shares, Class A shares unchanged at $12.02 a share. Taking a look at some of the oil names which moved around today following the death of the Iranian leader over the weekend. We see ExxonMobil shares pulling back 97 cents at 118.67. Chevron stock, Chevron still based here in California, moving down $1.53 at 161.14. And BP shares moved lower by 23 cents at 37.26. Interestingly, the cruise line stocks were among the big gainers today. Norwegian Caribbean Cruise Line shares moved up $1.19 at $16.94, a jump of about 7.5%. And right behind it, Carnival Cruise Lines moving up $1.09 at $16.09 a share. We'll be discussing what's happening with the oil markets with John Kilduff, oil analyst at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. He'll be joining me live later this hour. And we'll also be focusing on the market action today as we get through this afternoon. The Dow coming off its high water mark of just above 40,000 today, pulling back by nearly 200 points at 39,807. The S&P 500 moved up 5 at 5308, and the Nasdaq Composite gained 109 points at 16,795. The yield on the 10-year note now at 4.45%. Checking the cryptos now, we've seen Bitcoin's been on a roll, just shy of 70,000. Right now pulling back about 400 at 69,635. Ethereum up 133 at 3,633. And Doge right now at 16 cents. NVIDIA, as I mentioned, one of the stars of the day at more than $23 at $947 and change. Apple at $191.04 and Google at $178.46. Amazon, also part of the Magnificent Seven, actually pulled back slightly today by $1.16, $183.54 now for Amazon. And taking a look at some of the other movers today, we see Reddit, which of course had its IPO not too long ago, pulling back 82 cents at 61.22. Intel, one of the tech bellwethers, moving slightly higher today, up 27 cents at 32.10. Rivian in the EV space down 22 cents at $10.28. Disney, back to Hollywood here, down 34 cents at 102.90. Tesla shares pulling back 251 at 174.95. Tesla, of course, having big operations in China, was mentioned today during the China-California Business Forum. So was Disney, of course, with Disney Shanghai. Shares of BlackRock down $7 and change at 805.19, and MU Micron Technology shares up nearly $4 at 129 and change. Taking a look at what else is happening today, we'll be, of course, following the latest news in the Middle East as well, with a nervous time, not only in Iran following the death of the leader there, but the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas following the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas. We're watching the latest headlines there. We're following the Israel-Gaza live updates. More than 800,000 people have now fled Rafah, according to authorities there, as the Israeli-Hamas war crosses the 7-month mark. Renewed negotiations now are underway to secure the release of the hostages that were taken by Hamas. Israeli forces continue to prepare for an apparent invasion of the southern Gaza town of Rafah. We're watching developments closely there. President Biden, meanwhile, today said what Israel has carried out in Gaza during the war is not genocide, but he did denounce the application for arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court against the Israeli Prime Minister and other Israeli leaders. Biden making the comments during an event in the Rose Garden celebrating Jewish American Heritage Month, where he fiercely defended Israel in the war against Hamas. Meanwhile, the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages recovered last week were found in a tunnel in northern Gaza, according to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. The bodies were found and believed to have been killed during the October 7th Hamas attack and taken into Gaza. They were recovered following a months-long operation, according to the IDF. Israeli forces have also located intelligence materials and large quantities of weapons during the operation, according to the IDF statement. Continue to follow what's happening there very, very closely, and we'll certainly discuss what's happening in the Middle East overall with our oil analyst, John Kilduff, who will be joining us live later this hour. Taking a look at the meme stock frenzy, which had its moment in the last couple of weeks. We are following that as well. The meme stock rally, according to Market Watch, that sent shares of GameStop and AMC Entertainment Holdings skyrocketing, appears to have calmed down a bit now, with GameStop shares reversing earlier losses to end today's session up about 4%. And AMC moved up nearly 10%. The company saw their stock prices soar back on May 13th and 14th, lifted by the return of this guy, Keith Gill, also known as Roaring Kitty on social media, but then pared back their gains. GameStop stock ended Friday's session down nearly 20%, while AMC shares were down more than 5% on Friday. Roaring Kitty kicked off a busy week on social media with his first post on X, formerly known as Twitter, in 3 years. The first time he was on Twitter in 3 years, or X now, on May 12th. The investor and analyst was an influential figure in the meme stock frenzy that we saw 3 years ago. And that was followed by a flurry of often cryptic posts last week that harnessed clips from movies and television. This guy's most recent post on X came Friday afternoon, featured a clip from the movie E.T., the extraterrestrial. The clip shows the iconic scene in which E.T. says farewell to a tearful Elliot, one of the most famous scenes in American cinema. As in many Gill's posts last week, music also features prominently, and in this case, the Supertramp song Goodbye Stranger. Trying to figure all of this out and how it relates to the markets. The rally sparked memories of the gamification of trading during the meme stock heyday of 2021, but was also described as an outlier event by a visiting finance professor and co-author of the book Advanced Introduction to Behavioral Finance. That's Victor Ricciardi, who has been talking to Market Watch. There was a twist in the week's events on Friday when GameStop delivered a quarterly profit and sales warning while filing to issue more shares, and an analyst at Wedbush Securities here in Los Angeles viewed the share issuance positively and raised GameStop's price target on Friday to $7 from $5.60. Some of the other heavily shorted stocks, including SunPower, Maxion Solar, MicroCloud Hologram, Children's Place, Beyond Meat, Spirit Airlines, Plug Power, also swept up in last week's meme stock wave. By the way, GameStop shares now up 32% this year, while AMC shares are down 21% as we follow the bouncing ball there. We'll have a complete wrap-up of more action today on Wall Street. In case you are just tuning in, the NASDAQ was the star of the day today, with tech names rallying to record highs. The NASDAQ ended the day at a record high, up 109 points at 16,795. The Dow pulling back from its all-time high, now just below 40K. The S&P 500 managed to close and gain 5 points near its all-time high at 5308. Now let's get the latest on your ride this afternoon here on 790 KABC. Folks, let's be honest, sometimes we find ourselves or a loved one dealing with a massive injury caused by a terrible accident by no fault of our own. Sometimes it's simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, we're good at preparing for earthquakes and fires, but let's not forget to prepare in case we're involved in a major accident. It's critical to know who to call first. Clark Fielding became a lawyer to help you in a crisis. Fielding Law is focused on justice and resources for you because they understand how the system works and what to do in the most horrific situations. I always say to put the Fielding Law team in your phone under the word accident, so all you have to do is hit dial. Believe me, you'll feel a lot better having set this up for yourself and your family. The number to call, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. With the population exploding and increased vehicles on the freeways, be proactive, prepare for the worst, and expect the best. But if and when you do need help, call Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Again, that's clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek on Money continues here, 790 KABC. The NASDAQ taking the spotlight today at a record high at the close, kicking off the new week, up 109 points at 16,795. The Dow pulling back from its all-time high above 40,000, which it hit on Friday. The Dow down 197 at 39,807. The S&P 500 managed a closing gain of 5 points at 5308. It's hovering near its all-time high. The yield in the 10-year note now 4.45%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. It's been easing lately. Crypto's been on a roll lately. Bitcoin up around 70,000 again. Right now down about 400 at 69,635. Ethereum down about 130 at 3,633. And Doge at 16 cents. NVIDIA on a roll too, up more than $23 today at $947.80. J.P. Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, has implied that he might retire earlier than planned as the bank's chief executive. During a Q&A session at J.P. Morgan's Investor Day, Jamie Dimon offered a timetable different than his long-standing response to questions about secession. According to the Wall Street Journal, the timetable isn't 5 years anymore, he said. He did not provide further details. Shares of J.P. Morgan Chase slipped about 4.5% on the day. It actually slipped further after his comments. Jamie Dimon, among the longest-serving CEOs at a major bank or financial services company, he received a special bonus in 2021 and has often responded to questions about secession by saying he planned on staying at J.P. Morgan for 5 more years. Elon Musk in the news again today. New York's city investment chief and other key investors now urging Tesla shareholders to vote against Chief Executive Elon Musk's $56 billion pay package and the re-election of board directors Kimball Musk and James Murdoch. Musk's pay, voided in a Delaware court in January, does not serve Tesla shareholders, according to the group in an open letter today. Tesla shareholders will vote on the CEO package as well as the company's reincorporation in Texas and the 2 board members' re-election. Mottek on Money continues here. We did get another big story today, and this one involves the guy who inspired the movie Wall Street, Boesky. And let's bring up that story here now. Ivan Boesky dying today at the age of 87. He was the one who made the news years ago, an icon of 1980s trading, and inspired the Gordon Gekko character in the TV, or actually the movie Wall Street. Ivan Boesky, convicted in 1980s insider trading scandals, dead today at the age of 87. He went to prison and paid a record $100 million fine for a sprawling insider trading scandal back in the 1980s. Ivan Boesky, dead today at 87. Turning back now to the tech space, which got a big bump today. As we heard, the NASDAQ at a record high. Palo Alto Network shares actually falling after hours now as the cybersecurity firm failed to sport much upside with its latest quarterly forecast, which bracketed the consensus view, according to MarketWatch. Now, that company generated third-quarter net income of $278.8 million, or 79 cents a share, compared with a net income of $107.8 million, or 31 cents a share in the year-earlier quarter. Looks like Palo Alto's fourth-quarter forecast calls for revenue of $2.15 billion to $2.17 billion. The stock was down about 10% now in after-hours action. It lost 28% in the session after the last earnings report. The company's latest outlook today was not much better than the forecast Palo Alto gave back in February. Taking a look at NVIDIA, well, let's focus on that magnificent one and the latest news on NVIDIA. Investors expecting the best from NVIDIA earnings and what that could mean for the stock. NVIDIA shares moving sharply higher today, as I mentioned, and it's going to be in the spotlight this week ahead of the company's high-stakes first-quarter earnings report, which will come in after the markets close on Wednesday. The estimates here now showing analysts revising expectations higher ahead of the earnings report from NVIDIA. Bullish investors expecting the chipmaker's revenue and guidance to beat analyst estimates by more than $1 billion. Analysts suggesting investors' expectations may be too high and could contribute to a big move in NVIDIA's stock price after the company's earnings announcement. NVIDIA shares did gain in intraday trading today ahead of the highly anticipated first-quarter earnings report due after the bell on Wednesday and came in for a closing gain of 23.01 at 947.80. Apple also participating in the rally today, up $1.17 at 191.04. But also, interestingly, the cruise lines, which have been doing quite well lately on their bookings and so forth, topping the leader list today. Norwegian Caribbean Cruise Lines closed up $1.19 at $16.94, a gain of about 7.5%, and Carnival shares gained $1.09 at $16.09 a share, a gain of 7.3%. And now the latest news for you here on 790 KABC. Mottek on Money continues here, 790 KABC. A nervous start to the week in the energy markets following the death of Iran's president in a helicopter crash. The crash carrying Iran's president and foreign minister claimed both of their lives. The supreme leader in Iran, who has the final say in the theocracy there, quickly named a little-known vice president as caretaker and insisted the government was in control, but the deaths marking yet another blow to Iran, which, of course, was behind the attack on Israel by Hamas back on October 7th, as was clearly laid out by the Wall Street Journal the day after that attack, and, of course, the recent attack on Israel as well. The crash coming as the Israel-Hamas war roils the region. Iran-backed Hamas led the attack that started the conflict, and Hezbollah, also supported by Tehran, fired rockets at Israel. Last month, Iran launched its own unprecedented drone and missile attack on Israel. Following all these developments closely and the impact on the oil markets as well as the financial markets, joining us live now, prominent oil analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital and CNBC contributor, longtime contributor to this program. John Kilduff, thank you very much for taking the call on this big latest news. What's the latest coming across your desk there?
Well, the latest, Frank, is, and I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but this is obviously no great loss for people in the West and, people who love freedom. And what was interesting, though, about this was that Raisi, believe it or not, is what would pass for a moderate in Iran. So, his loss is a little bit of a setback to the extent any of us could ever hope for, more normalized relations or any kind of, rapprochement with Iran. And now it's a lock that will get the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei's son, to replace him, the Supreme Leader, who is the true leader of Iran, the true dictator of Iran. The Iranian presidency role is just sort of a public-facing role and actually one that handles a lot of the dirty laundry in terms of but just like the attacks on Israel. That was something that came out of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran, that runs things, and then the president is more involved in the details. I can tell you that whenever one of these adventures are cooked up, the Supreme Leader is given supreme deniability, and I expect that to go forward. The oil market took it in stride, though, Frank. I'll tell you, we were only up a few pennies on the news as we all digested it and realized that it wasn't really much of a change for Iran. And what's unfortunate to a degree was that what got overshadowed with this situation was, and we're going to be hearing about this week, was apparently a good amount of progress between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, which could end up with Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel. And that's going to put Iran in a box and create all kinds of new problems for it as it becomes increasingly isolated in the region. So there's a lot of significant developments here. I think the U.S.-Saudi situation is part of what's keeping oil prices here in check for what would otherwise have been a very upsetting to the oil market, that is, news cycle here out of the Middle East again.
On the air live with oil analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital, also CNBC contributor. So now this guy, Mohammed Mokber, Iran's first vice president, named the country's interim president. So as you said, it looks like the market's taking this in stride. No significant change in policy despite the death of the president in the helicopter crash over the weekend, as well as the foreign minister there. So at this point, it remains to be seen what happens. And, of course, the cause of this crash is still unknown.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, in this country, when you're a helicopter pilot that flies in fog needs to be what's called instrument rated. Maybe these folks weren't. I don't know. They also couldn't find the president's helicopter, if you can imagine that, within Iranian territory for several hours. So it was a real, real bad look for Iran to the extent they try to project any kind of military power and the like. This coming on the heels of that so-called attack on Israel. I mean, that they launched over 100 various missiles, drones, etc. They all got shot down except for one or two. So I mean, Iran is probably to use Saddam Hussein's old phrase, the mother of all paper tigers out that way. That's why I think increasingly the oil market doesn't get all that excited about a lot of these things, Frank, because the Iranians just don't have the tools. They have a lot of rhetoric. They can make mischief. They can cause some problems. They'll back groups like the Houthis, who will then, try to attack a ship here or there. But nothing direct, nothing truly kinetic, mostly asymmetrical, enough to get themselves in the headlines and keep sort of the worries aloft. But I think if there is this breakthrough with Israel and Saudi Arabia, all I can say is look at Iran. It's going to be unbelievably marginalizing for them. And I think we'll be able to move forward here finally past them and a lot of things potentially in the Middle East. This is a big deal. And this was started under President Trump, by the way, these Abraham-type accords and this idea that the Saudis would recognize Israel. So maybe here we go.
All excellent points. It should be noted we did hear from the U.S. Defense Secretary today, Lloyd Austin, saying the U.S. continues to monitor the situation surrounding the helicopter crash, which he called very unfortunate helicopter crash, but has no insight into the cause. In his words, he said, I don't necessarily see any broader regional security impacts at this point in time. So for now, looks like the situation there has eased as far as concerns are concerned, but we're watching what's happening on any potential other reactions that we might see from Iran and, of course, getting to the bottom of what happened there. Now, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and that, of course, is very, very big news. John Kilduff, and new concerns about the health of Saudi Arabia's king also making news today that could potentially impact the energy markets. I believe we had a fairly large Saudi delegation here for the global conference recently, and we're following developments there very closely as well.
Indeed, Frank. And, King Salman has been ill for quite some time. This does sound like, however, from the details that I've been getting, that he will pull through yet again here. He had a lung infection from other complications, so they're treating him with antibiotics. So he is, the leaders there are elderly as well, and they do hang on. But again, the fact that these talks that I've been referencing appear to be bearing fruit definitely have his imprimatur on it. Look, the Saudis desperately want to modernize and not be as reliant as they've been on oil. I think some of the policies economically, in particular, that they're chasing may end up being something of a fool's errand. There's some white elephants that they're building, 100-mile long buildings and the like are grandiose, but will they pay the bills ultimately? I guess we'll see. But again, to the extent that they're westward looking, towards the United States, part of this U.S.-Saudi deal will have them turning away from China, which is going to be an interesting development. So, once again, the oil market stays really on tenterhooks, Frank. But as long as we can keep things sort of on the even keel, California drivers shouldn't be paying much more than $6-7 a gallon that you get stuck with from time to time, and hopefully lower than that as time progresses here.
Right. So let's talk about the price of oil now. Still hovering around $80 a barrel here in the U.S., up around 83 right in London, I believe. So where do you see the price of oil go from here?
I've been saying for some time that we should be trending lower. I am not in the camp that these prices should skyrocket for any real reason. I don't see the Israel-Hamas battle spilling over region-wide. I don't see the Middle East, even Iran, wanting to use oil as a weapon anytime soon. Again, one pushback on them on that idea is China. China is their biggest customer, not us. To the extent they become an insecure or unstable or less reliable supplier, that hurts them as well. They know that. There's more supply coming on from various countries now, not just the United States, Ghana, and a couple others that are coming on strong. So, OPEC has its hands full here in terms of trying to hold on to their market share. So I do think we have Memorial Day, obviously, this weekend. The oil market will take stock, Frank, of where we stand in terms of inventories of gasoline, crude oil, and other refined products. We're okay. So with that, prices should be trending lower here through the course of the summer like they typically do.
All right, we're looking at $5.17, by the way, the average price for regular gas here in Los Angeles. It's about 8 cents below where it was a week ago, but let's see, about 40 or so cents higher than a year ago. Premium all the way up there at $5.54 a gallon on average here in the Los Angeles area. A year ago it was $5.19, so we're still riding higher than where we were a year ago. Diesel, by the way, at $5.23 a gallon. and that's about where it was a year ago. That is still considered the global fuel and the lifeblood of the economy. Diesel still stubbornly high there at $5.23 a gallon. Any predictions here on where these prices go from here?
Well, Frank, again, this is the crunch. We're heading into the start of the summer driving season this weekend. The other issue that we haven't talked about, which is obviously in the front minds of the oil trading community, like myself, is the Ukraine-Russian war. That is still a big factor here for the oil market. Russian supplies have been curtailed, and the Ukrainians are making great use of their own drone technology to consistently hit Russian refineries in particular. So to the extent we lose that Russian supply, and I don't blame the Ukrainians one bit for what they're doing, we are going to keep, that's what's helping to keep these prices aloft. So to the extent we get any kind of relief from that situation, or more pressure gets brought to bear on Ukraine not to attack the Russian energy infrastructure, again there's another ability for oil prices, gasoline and diesel prices to really head considerably lower, because the threat to supply is really in our minds or in the stars. They're not actual. They haven't come to fruition for the past several years. I don't see them coming to fruition. That's why I'm still in the camp that these prices should be trending lower, not higher.
All right. On that note, we'll leave it at that. John, thank you very much for taking the call here on all this big news. And, of course, we'll keep the line open to you on all things related to what's happening in the Middle East, the oil markets, as well as the financial markets impact. That is prominent oil analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital, CNBC contributor and longtime contributor to this program. John, thank you very much for coming to the line here today.
My pleasure, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And right out to the freeways now, 790 KBC. Mottek on Money continues here in 790 KBC. How about this? Did you know that California requires that doctors who engage in telehealth with California patients have to be licensed here in California? The restrictions also affect out-of-state medical specialists whose care is critical to their patients in California. A federal lawsuit has now been filed challenging the constitutional limits on telehealth, which prevent California patients from accessing specialty care that local doctors are not able to provide. Joining us live now is Caleb Trotter, an attorney at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Caleb, thank you very much for taking the call on this, and tell us about the lawsuit that's been filed in this case.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. So this lawsuit, there are two plaintiffs. One is a woman from remote northern coastal California. She's in a very remote area. She has a very rare bleeding disorder. There are no doctors that specialize in treating such a disorder, especially in women, which is even rarer still. She's discovered that her most knowledgeable specialists are in Portland, and due to the nature of this disorder, she sometimes, as often as once a month, needs to consult with them just to help manage this condition so she can live, a healthy, happy life. But because of kind of a return to things post-COVID, those specialists have informed her that they're not willing or able to continue to speak with her over the phone because they're only licensed in Oregon. So she's faced with the decision of 14-hour round-trip drives to do things that previously could be handled with a 5 to 10-minute phone call. And so it's a tremendous burden on her with her having to decide whether to do that or just give up this care. The second plaintiff, and I'll keep this brief, is a radiation oncologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, one of the top cancer hospitals in the country. And he regularly has a need to consult with patients before they travel to him for in-person radiation treatment. And then often they also need to follow up just to see how things are going. But likewise, he's licensed as a physician only in New York, and California's requirements that he and others like him be licensed in California as well is preventing him from being able to provide those consultations. So it's a very serious matter, and that's why we've sued.
Is California unique in this requirement that people here being treated in California, whether it be in person or by telehealth, have the license here in California?
There's about 30 states that we're aware of that require physicians, even if they're licensed in another state, to duplicatively have a license in the state where a patient's located. And we think there's a real problem with that because with physician licensure, the substantive requirements, the schooling, the residency, the actual knowledge, and the exams, it's substantively all identical from state to state, so that a doctor would need to have multiple licenses is not actually contributing at all to increased public health or safety for patients in those subsequent states. What it instead does is it creates a very real burden for the physicians to maintain multiple licenses, not just to mention the fees and the continuing education requirements that differ from state to state, but it's a very it's a bureaucratic process, and it's a lot to keep track of when you are a specialty physician, and that's really all the context of this case is about, is specialty physicians who need to provide advice and consultation with patients across the country. So this case wouldn't affect, direct care where you're actually calling up to get the actual treatment over the phone or a video call. This is really just about consultations, and any in-person treatment would take place in the state where the physician is licensed. So unfortunately, California is not alone, but it's also one of the strictest, that it includes criminal penalties for physicians who violate it.
Thank you for being so well informed on this. Where does this lawsuit go from here?
It was just filed on Thursday in the federal district court up here in Sacramento. It's the beginning of a long road. That's one of the courts with one of the greater backlogs, so it could be a while until we get a resolution. But we also have a case we filed a few months ago in New Jersey. So both of these kind of hand in hand, we're hoping to, even though the court process can drag on, really start to put a public face on the problems of overburdensome licensure and how they can, harm patients when they tend to be well-meaning, but in this context, it is a very real burden and harm to the very people they're intended to help.
Attorney Caleb Trotter, an attorney at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Caleb, thank you very much for taking the call on this here on Mottek on Money on 790 KBC, and what turned out to be a record-shattering day for tech stocks, with the NASDAQ closing at a record high of 109 points at 16,795. The Dow pulling back nearly 200 off its record high, back to 39,807, and the S&P 500 of 5 near its record high at 5308. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be doing more at 4 tomorrow for you right here on Mottek on Money, 790 KBC.
The Bigger Pockets portfolio of podcasts are worthy of your investment.
We're having a real conversation as real estate investors.
New episodes available every day.
It's important to buy where it makes money and not necessarily where you want to travel to.
Bigger Pockets, On the Market, Rookie Real Estate, or Money Podcast.
The purpose of flipping is to create more cash so then you can reinvest into other types of properties.
The Bigger Pockets Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen.